If I had a rupee for every time I've heard the buzzword women empowerment, I would be sipping margaritas on my private yacht in the Maldives right now. While it's become an inextricable part of our corporate lexicon over the years, we find that on ground, reality has a little bit of catching up to do with the dream. So, how do we craft a culture that creates space for everybody, especially women? That's the question that we're here to answer today. Hello, everyone. My name is Rochelle Pinto, and I'm the editor of Tweak India. As a media platform for the multitasking women, we are privileged to be leading this investigation into the corporate hurdles that are facing Indian women in 2022. Thanks to a report published by our partners at Accenture, we know that 29% of women feel significantly less support from their employers than their male co-workers. Accenture also found that 70% of women who aspire to senior leadership feel unhappy with the pace of advancement. But most interestingly, these reports find that if leaders focus on the everyday moments that matter, they can drive human potential up by almost 5x for women, which is the most of any group surveyed. Joining me today on this panel are powerhouses from the corporate world. Our first panelist is an alumnus of Oxford and Harvard. She's the vice chairperson of one of the most beloved brands in the country, VIP Industries. Radhika Piramal is a true path breaker in corporate India, and she uses her privilege to advocate for inclusivity and diversity, especially for the LGBTQIA+ community. Serial entrepreneur Kirti Poonia is the ex-CEO of Okhai, a fashion brand that impacts over 27,000 rural artisans. And she has also recently co-founded Relove, a circular fashion tech company that has sustainability as its driving force. And rounding up our panel today is Lakshmi Chandrasekharan. She's the managing director and lead for human resources for Accenture in India, where she leads human capital strategy. Lakshmi enjoys mentoring young people, especially women from diverse socioeconomic backgrounds. And this truly amazes me. She also speaks 5 languages fluently. So welcome, everybody. Thank you so much. It is indeed a pleasure and an honor to be sitting on the same panel as you. I'd love to start with one question that I hope all of you can answer from your individual experience. And that is the title of our discussion today. What, in your opinion, is the number one hurdle Indian women are facing in the professional space? If we could start with Radhika.
Hi, everybody, and thank you, Tweak and Accenture, for inviting me for this super important conversation. I can think of 3 or 4 different things that immediately come to mind that prevent women from going ahead. But I have to say, I think, in my opinion, the number one is the unequal burden of childcare in the family and the home, which means that women, just to get to the same place as men, they need to seek a lot of extra support, either from in-laws or from nannies, maids, helpers, and then also from their organization in terms of the roles and the flexibility. So I think managing childcare is the number one challenge.
Okay. Kirti?
Absolutely. I think if you look at the leaky pipeline, it starts when women start getting married, and then of course the main chunk happens when they have their first child. I'll give you an example. I was running Okhai for about 5 years and I decided to get married. So I took my fiance to the villages to go meet the artisans. They didn't look happy. They were very upset. They were looking at us as if, it was something not very good that was happening. So my husband asked them that, hey, what's the problem? So they said that inko shadi ke baad, you must let her work after marriage because our income depends on her working. And that was such a, I get goosebumps every time I think about this story, because across India, the impression is that once you get married, you will stop working. Once you have kids, you will stop working.
Absolutely. That's so true. Lakshmi, I'm sure that you have a lot of inputs on this.
Yeah, and women, in my view, they want to build a fulfilling career and an enriching life outside of work, and they want both. It's not an either or, right? We have a little over 140,000 women at Accenture in India. And in speaking with several of them, I know this is a real need and also a very, very tough balance. And I think I'm going to echo a little bit of what we've already heard. The challenges that women face, however, differ based on their unique personal and professional situation, or what stage of their life and career they're at. And so it's important that we don't kind of generalize this either, and to kind of really approach this person by person. And while I do agree, one of the first and the most common challenge, which has gotten amplified even further since the pandemic, is really the kind of need to balance work and home, when the responsibility of caregiving has unfortunately disproportionately fallen on the women. Which, leading to that whole classic struggle of balancing work, balancing domestic responsibilities, which has gotten now intensified in my view, which is leading to stress. And that's impacting the overall well-being of our women, and sometimes their ability to kind of contribute at work as well. And so therefore it's important that, and this can get amplified even further, unfortunately, if organizations do not equip, do not have the right support structures, either be caregiving support or childcare support or flexible working policies, or don't have supervisors and team leaders that are engaging in discussions to really understand what every individual person, what support they really require. And I think you alluded to this stats that 29% women feel significantly less supported by their male counterparts, especially in moments that matter, whether it be their life events or onboarding or compensation, etc. So those, in my view, are big challenges. And I think as women, I believe we must each use our voice and speak for ourselves at work as well as at home. We have a voice, we've got to own it, we've got to use it. And that includes putting up our hands perhaps for new opportunities, even if we don't feel 100% ready, or asking for help, whether at home or at office, and very confidently talking about our own contributions and achievements.
Well, you have dived right in, Lakshmi, and thank you for bringing us to this point, because this is exactly what we're going to be spending a lot of time discussing. I want to take it back to Radhika. Lakshmi just mentioned about the male support and having and ensuring you stand up and speak for yourself. Now, I'm sure that as is typical for business families in this country, the assumption is that the reins of the family business get handed over to the son, and in the absence of a son, the son-in-law or a male relative, right? Were you groomed from a young age by your father to take on the role that you're in now? And if so, what is your advice for other parents? Because we would really want to start this conversation from the beginning, right? From the home, from childhood. How do we equip young girls to actually feel like they deserve a seat at the table?
That's a great question. Honestly, I think the luckiest thing that happened in my life is that I don't have any brothers. So that's just sort of God's gift to me and my family. So I have an older sister, and I'll never know the truth, right? Like, would my father have been different if there had been a brother? We don't know, because he wasn't there. So within the context of myself and my older sister growing up, my father obviously did not differentiate between the two of us. And my mother is a PhD, and she was an author, from the mid 80s onwards. So she very much encouraged our education, and that's how both my sister and I ended up going to Oxford for undergrad and then Harvard Business School. And so I'm not sure if I was exactly groomed, but certainly my father sort of made me feel there's anything I could do anything I wanted to, including running the business. And that's where my interest naturally led me to.
Right.
So I'm lucky that I didn't have those brothers. But my advice to parents would be, be conscious of the gender differentiation that you start to do at a very early age, as early as 3, 4, 5, 6 years old. And don't put an extra burden of caregiving on your daughter if you have a son. So for example, suppose there's a sick neighbor and you have to give some food to that neighbor, okay? Or some COVID, you have to help and leave food outside the door. Don't just ask your daughter to do it, your 12-year-old or 15-year-old daughter, if there's a 12 or a 15-year-old son in the house. Or who gets the first hot roti at the table. These are these small things at home that make a difference. And then it gets into, okay, if there's a choice in economics about who can study an extra 2 years or who gets that extra tutor, things like that, don't differentiate between your son and your daughter.
Right. It should be merit-based. When I was asking about grooming, I was thinking about, a conversation that we were recently having where they say that in the home, conversations around business or around, say, careers and your future, they tend to be more towards, they tend to be had largely with the male children. And with the female children, it's more about looks and it's more about popularity. The conversations are different. So from that perspective, what I meant in grooming was your father exposing you to his world, to his, to the future of corporate, knowing one day that you would, or hoping rather, one day that you need it?
I think he was hoping that, and very much we talked about business on the dinner table. And I mean, I say I'm lucky I did not have brothers. I'm also lucky that my father was not one of those Marwari businessmen who assumed that a son-in-law would take over, or that he would have to sell the business because he does not have sons. That also happens. So, I think he just sort of educated us well, and we went out in the world, and he was very, very happy when I joined the business.
So your dad is one of the original feminist allies.
He is absolutely. But things change also. So, I thought he was so feminist at the time. But if I look at it with today's lens or the millennial lens, every generation wants more and more. And I see that as progress, not as a bad thing. So, for example, some of the language that is used by people of my father's generation, including myself, maybe it was okay when I was 14. It's not so great now when I'm almost 44,
Right. Absolutely. No. So we come from you with a family background in business, and perhaps an advantage, as you often talk about, your privilege from having had that step up. We come to Kirti, who doesn't have, to the best of my knowledge, any background in business. Her family comes from a very different background. Kirti, Accenture's research reveals that only 2.8% of Fortune Global 500 CEOs are women, and just 1 in 5 startups have a woman founder. So I know that you weren't the founder of Okhai, but you helped build this brand to one that now Lakshmi knows right off the top of her mind. How did you beat the odds? And what is the advice that you have for women who are following in your footsteps?
So I think, quick heads up, I grew up oblivious to sexism because I was born in a family, my father's in the Indian Army, and I think the Army is a lot more liberal in their culture. So I think it could be right place, right time. I was also a part of the Tata group when I started working, where sexism is not very predominant. They're actually very women friendly as an organization. The culture is more of mentorship, and that's towards both men and women. So I think I didn't really come across that in my time, and I tried to not let it be the focus of my work, let it be performance. When it came to wanting to be a part of the boys club or anything like that, I think from the very start, I always had a very strong girls club. And I was always very thick with them. Every single opportunity that I've got, I can say that about 90% of them have come through very successful other women who were rooting for me. So I think if you make your own ecosystem, which is beautiful and solid, and let performance speak, then very little of this really matters and falls in front of you.
Thank you for that. It's truly a privilege, though, to grow up in an environment that where sexism isn't in your face. And it's interesting that you say that in the Army, which is traditionally filled with men, when one thinks of the Army, one very rarely thinks of a woman in uniform. Were you allowed to participate in all the conversations? Were you allowed to go to those crazy Army parties that we hear so much about?
Absolutely. I think we always had a little library for the kids where we would be kind of like gathered and herded in, and the adults could enjoy the drinks. So, but I think when it came to graduation, when it came to education, when it came to any of those things, it was always equal. In many households, I've seen that people send the son to tuitions and don't send the girl to tuitions. And I've seen that even in urban India, rural India for sure, there was nothing like that at all. I was the first one to be sent to boarding school. And I think that really changed a large part of me, made me a lot more independent. And I think it wasn't because I was a girl, I was the elder one and I was being sent first.
I'm just kind of itching to jump in, Rochelle. I know the question was not for me, but just listening to both Radhika and Kirti, it kind of almost brings to bear for me the fact that as we were growing up, and personally me, I grew up in Kolkata, right? And my dad's a banker, my mother's a housewife, we're 2 sisters. But again, not really knowing that being a girl, I was different from my neighbor who was a boy. I think it starts very, very young. I think the conversations parents have with their children, whether they be girls or they boys, is so important. And it just kind of reinforces that for me in terms of the conversation I'm having with my son. He's almost 21. Is even more important, I think, than conversations that we have with our daughters, because, really fully understanding. And I think for the very longest period of my time as I was growing up in my career, I never really thought the whole gender agenda was even important, because I never experienced any differentiation or differentiated treatment because I was a girl in terms of where I worked, doing some sales stint in Orissa or Bhubaneswar somewhere, right? I never felt the difference. But then as I started working, I started engaging with the not so privileged women, girl children especially, because, they almost have to fight for their right to go for higher education sometimes. And that's kind of really how this whole conversation became a lot more important. And, the responsibility that each one of us who are in a position of privilege, having experienced the kind of upbringing we have had and the conversations we've had with our parents, with our friends, with our cousins, etc., that is something we've got to really help, I think, a broader the younger generation across urban, rural India, so that we kind of creating that level playing field, isn't it?
I completely agree, and which is why I'd love to take this back, exactly your point, to Kirti. Now, Kirti, we know that, we're so glad that you didn't have to face these hurdles, because, you've done such amazing work. But in your experience working with the artisans, you are likely to have come across a lot of women who did have to fight, whose just existence, the fact that they were even at the age they were at, and they had the skill set that they had, was probably a privilege for them. So tell us a little bit about how that weighed against your own upbringing. And I'd love for everybody to kind of talk about that one moment where they really understood their privilege for the first time. If we could start with Kirti.
So, I've seen that when a woman brings money home, she buys a stake in the decision-making process of the household. So I saw that they were taking money home from Okhai, and then they were making sure that their sons and daughters both were going to tuitions.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's wonderful. And while this obviously is a story from somebody from a rural background, perhaps underprivileged background, but these stories are quite common. Like it's even in your upper middle class homes, or it's all pervasive through every section of society. So Radhika, was there a moment where you really felt your privilege because you saw that somebody else had to really fight for where they had come?
Yeah, look, I've understood my privilege from a young age because I was born into this business family. And sometimes people joke that COO does not stand for, Chief Operating Officer. It stands for Child of Owner. So, but I want to talk so I've known about my privilege, I'm going to say, from a young age. But what actually was a realization for me is, when was the first time I experienced economic independence and realized that how that shifts how much control a man has in my life. So in a way, being in a family business, my father's had a lot of control over my life, especially if I want to join the business, and I have for the last 12 years, he's been my boss. So although, I'm married to a woman, I'm not married to a man. So my husband, I don't have a husband who has control on me, but in some ways I do have a father who has a fair amount of control on me. And the experience of freedom I had was actually after my MBA. I went to work for Bain & Company in New York. And that was actually a very liberating thing. The work was not as interesting as running VIP. I don't think, a future in consulting was for me. But that feeling of, okay, now I make my decisions is huge. Because then when I moved back to India in 2009 from New York, I moved with my wife, we were out. And then it was a real great conversation with my father, who said, come back to India. And I said, yes, Papa, I would love to, I would, but I have my, girlfriend at the time, now wife, Amanda, how do we have this? And he said, no, come, let's try it. We'll work it out. We'll find some solutions. So probably he would have done that anyway, but me having that job at Bain, I felt I could argue my case that much better. And so my advice to all the young women or even older women listening in is, if you have your financial independence, then you finally don't have to ask for permission to your father, your brother, your husband. And that's a great feeling.
Yeah, Twinkle has a line where she says, you don't have to toe the line set by the hand that writes the checks if you have financial independence. Lakshmi, I'd love to hear from you, because we are talking about privilege. We're talking about attacking it we're talking about attacking this disparity right at the source, which is in the home. And you also beautifully spoke about how you're educating your son, right? Because everyone always focuses on the daughter, but hey, the sons are the ones also participating in this conversation. I'd love to hear from you. What are the policies in your experience that you've noticed companies putting into practice that have really helped bridge this gap, where women from diverse, as you yourself love to mentor, women from diverse socio-economic backgrounds are able to at least taste freedom and taste equality when they enter the workplace?
Yeah, and I'm glad you used the word equality, because I think first and foremost, having a strong culture of equality is very, very paramount, right? Where all diverse groups, whether women, whether our persons with disability, our persons from the LGBTQI community, all have equal opportunities to learn, to grow, to succeed. That is paramount in my view. And we at Accenture we've had a very rich tradition of being one of the first movers to implement some of the progressive policies in India. Back in 2017, I think we were one of the first to equate adoption and surrogacy leave with maternity leave, for example. That was also the year where I remember our previous CEO went global and announced publicly that we're going to be a gender balanced workforce by 2025, which really means 50% men, 50% women, including at leadership level. We said, we'll have 30% managing directors as women. And if you just look at the numbers, we're very close to achieving those goals. We're about, I talked about 141,000 women that we have in Accenture in India. That's about 47% of our workforce. 25% of our managing directors are women. So I think it starts by kind of setting the direction and the tone right from the very top. And really then investing in women, both in terms of building their skills. So for example, we do big time investment on learning. We invested in helping women build long, meaningful careers, focusing on their skill, focusing on their capability development, focusing on their networking. And all of these three elements are very, very important. So, in addition to, curated training programs that are focused on skills, we have very focused programs like high-tech women programs, or programs aimed at certifying women as technical architects, and programs that focus on mentoring and sponsoring women. And they're very different, right? Mentoring and sponsoring through very personalized coaching and networking opportunities. In fact, the reason I keep harping about networking is because our research shows that involvement in networks positively correlates with women's advancement. So that's one area that we've been very, very invested in. And the second is really supporting and enabling women through their various life stages so they can continue to achieve their career aspirations. And if I can share a couple of examples, the first one, which I'm very proud of, is our Returning Mothers program that really helps them seamlessly reintegrate back into the workforce, whether it be flexible work options, whether it be coaching, whether it be mentoring by other experienced women who've returned after a break, and learning interventions, like because you've lost in touch with a few skills, and we're a technology business, so therefore, how do you invest in those skills? And last year alone, we had over 98% of our women, they returned to work after proceeding on a maternity break. So that's like a big milestone for us. And in addition to, and while we always had physical daycare facilities for our parents at work, what we've done in this whole new hybrid workplace, Rochelle, is we've introduced virtual benefits, virtual parental benefits, right? We have something called a virtual village, which connects Accenture children requiring coaching with other Accenture children willing to do the coaching.
Oh, wow.
On virtual summer camps. And virtual parental benefit cards that gives a bouquet of online services that parents can then choose from. The point I'm making is it's got to be broader than just women if you want to truly enable an equal environment where women can also thrive.
I completely agree with you, and I love the idea of creating these networks. It kind of takes me back to what Kirti was saying earlier about she had created a girls' club for herself, right? Because this isn't even about storming any, cigar smoking bastions. This is really about changing the culture completely. And we see now in India, especially, a lot more of these clubs that are bringing together women from different backgrounds, but all with the same aspiration, which is to be the best possible version of themselves. So, Kirti, tell me, was it an early recognition on your part that you needed to create a community of women who would champion and cheerlead for each other? And how has that actually changed your career path?
So for sure, I think I had a sense of community. Right when I started, I'm a very big extrovert. I love other people in general, men or women, and I love interacting with people. So I think it came from that natural desire to get to know what are they doing, and fascinated by people who are doing excellent work, right? And then I realized the benefits of it are immense. People no longer feel alone. And even when I was the CEO of an organization, I never felt lonely at the top because I was friends with so many other CEOs in the fashion business. And I could always reach out to them and say, hey, this is a problem in my company. And then they would share problems from their company and we would solve it together. So I realized that there is just immense value in doing this together. When I started to, get a part of awards or certain structured networking systems, I realized that now I have almost 10 to 15 WhatsApp groups of different communities. So I have one which is women on boards, just women across India who sit on boards. And which is such a great place, right? I mean, we just discuss with each other anything to do with a board situation for a woman. I have one which is just social entrepreneurs who are women. I have one which is a young leaders council for women and men both, but there are a considerable number of women there. And I thought that now, even though they are simply WhatsApp groups, they are such strong communities. I was also thinking of doing formal dinners for women CEOs in fashion soon. Just informal ways to connect with people so that you don't feel lonely while you're doing something which seems like moving a big mountain.
Absolutely.
Can I just put a plug, just because we're talking about networking, and in addition to all the forums you just called out, Kirti, there is a Vahini network for all those women who are listening to us. We've been kind of together in the last 15 years, and we have more than 100,000 women over there. It's a fantastic network that connects women, especially in kind of across our industry, and it gives you amazing learning opportunities as well as networking opportunities. So just wanted to put a quick plug out there for women listening in.
Thank you, Lakshmi. Radhika, speaking of clubs, when you joined the business and when you joined at the level that you did, was it lonely for you? Were you one of the few women at the table? And what kind of struggles did you have to face? Of course, as you said that, you had, it was a family business, so you definitely came in with a slight advantage, but I'm sure that also worked against you in some way. So if you could just share with us a little bit about that period of time.
Yeah, in fact, I'm feeling a little jealous of Kirti because I was certainly very lonely. So I'll just, briefly, after undergrad, I worked in VIP as a brand manager, so at a junior level in marketing for about 4 years. And then I went to do my MBA, and then I was at Bain, and then I came back as managing director. So that was a quantum jump in seniority. And I was young, I was 32. And I was the only woman in almost every meeting, for the next 10 years. I'm going to say that. So after me, there was no women in my leadership team, despite me being a woman, and I can talk about my struggles in trying to hire. So it would be me and then men, and then the next person would be not the head of HR, but the sort of lieutenant was a woman. And then we had a few brand heads who were female. And so I did feel very lonely. And I found solutions outside, through various different networks. But it was a big adjustment for me, especially since I was coming from the United States and from my Harvard Business School. And the difference, I just want to describe it. So at Harvard Business School, 40% of the class is female. And some of the most popular and famous and sought after professors are female. And then I came to VIP and I was the only woman in the leadership team. And unfortunately then and still, women are 7% of our workforce. So I'm very keen to learn on this panel how to make that shift because it's extremely lonely. And, we can talk about hiring at senior levels and lateral hires versus promotions. I know it's a long journey, but when I look at companies like Accenture or even, HUL a decade ago was, I think, at 7-8%, and now they're at 40. So, I'm here equally to be inspired and learn and to make that journey now. It's been a decade and I'm impatient for progress.
I love that you're saying impatient for progress. And now that we're going to take it straight to Lakshmi. Lakshmi, if you were advising Radhika on how to just put her foot down and make the case for women, what would you advise her to do? How can all women who are in a position of power and influence open that door for other women to join them at the table?
I think it's, like I said, it starts with setting the tone at the top. And I think Radhika, in her position, you have that voice to kind of set that as the vision for your organization. But any vision needs to be backed by policies. It needs to be backed by your entire talent management framework needs to kind of enable that. For example,
Lakshmi, I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you my specific challenge. So I want to put quotas and targets, and I get a lot of pushback from my male colleagues who are in fact junior to me, but they're still pushing back. And until I can convince them, I can't move forward. So do you have any practical suggestion for me on this?
Yes, absolutely. Like I said, it has to be a performance metric, in my view. And that's how we've driven it. It is a performance metric. If I look at Julie's scorecard, Julie's our CEO, global CEO. If I look at her scorecard and the scorecard of the senior most leaders and what their rewards are driven by, one of the metrics is around inclusion and diversity. Right. So it is a metric. It's a business metric as much as it is a people metric. So therefore, it has to start with incorporating it as one of your business matrices that then get measured, cascaded, and if any help you need in terms of making the business case to say, what is the difference having a more inclusive, gender balanced workforce does in terms of productivity, in terms of innovation, in terms of truly kind of from even a talent pool availability. We can help you with all of that, Radhika, but it is an important conversation to kind of, it is not easy. It is not easy. But
how to shift the men's mind, because they feel they have to adjust to allow these more women come in. They have to adjust their behaviors. They have to adjust the office culture of post-hours networking. They have to adjust the sort of cigarette by the tapri culture, all that stuff. That's
it is a journey. I can assure you it is a journey, and it is not a journey that we were able to kind of turn around in a year's time. It has been a journey that we've been on for a decade or two. And it is, like I said, you make this about their performance and their rewards, everybody's performance and everybody's rewards. It starts becoming a part of the acceptable kind of metric. The pushbacks you will, for example, experience is, what about performance? Are you going to therefore recognize women even if they are not performing? And to, what Kirti mentioned, that is not true. We are a highly performance-driven organization, and you progress based on performance. You don't progress because you're a woman or a man, right? So it is chipping away at every conversation by kind of, like I said, you set the tone at the top. You have the policies in place. You have the enablers in place. I do not sign off on any promotion discussion today without checking on whether you've considered the broader, across men and women. I do not sign off on any leadership hire unless I've seen there is a pipeline of women candidates that you have also considered while arriving at your leadership, staffing decision. So it is about every aspect of your talent needs to be, you need to kind of take a look at it as a fresh pair of eyes to say, where all do I need to kind of adjust my policies and my practices? And it does not happen in a year. And I love the fact that you're impatient, but I think if you get going today, I'm confident that in another 5 years, you're going to not look at 7%, but hopefully 25%.
I see Kirti wants to jump in here. Kirti, please.
Yes. So when I was fundraising for my company, I went to several investors. I would have a team with 2 women and maybe some senior VCs who were men. And the men would just not understand why he would want to resell his jacket. And the women understood that they want to go home and sell that sari sitting in her wardrobe. So it was a resale business. And that's the moment I understood that if there are such few women entrepreneurs, the needs of women are not getting solved. Number 2 is quota. I have a very strong opinion that quota can be there at entry level, which is when you're recruiting the fresh batch of, sort of the batch coming in right now, which is straight out of college, because they've been given an equal standing to join college, and now they can join your company. I'm absolutely against any other quota after that, because that steals from women's success. Tomorrow, everybody is going to tell them that you got there because there was a quota over there. And that is something that is worse than your natural success. So I hear your company when they're talking about quota, you'll have to do that very carefully, because they will be there and they will not be treated right.
It sounds like there's
a balance, right, between quotas and targets. It's tricky.
Yeah.
It sounds
Quotas in my view it's not the right way to go, but that's just my view. I think targets, yes, but not quotas. Yeah.
Perhaps there's an opportunity here to marry what everybody's been saying. I mean, Lakshmi was talking about making sure there are upskilling programs, making sure that women who have been taken out of the workforce for reasons outside of their control, or perhaps out of choice, for childbearing reasons or various other reasons, are able to enter the workforce and be competitive. Because what we get told a lot on Tweak India, we have a lot of women writing into us saying, I want to rejoin the workforce. I have the opportunity to do so because now my child is self-sufficient and, my household kind of runs itself, but I feel so behind in terms of the culture. I feel so behind in terms of the technology, right? So companies need to create perhaps these upskilling programs and these opportunities where women feel safe to admit that they need help, and they're surrounded by non-judgmental mentors who are able to help them. The financial support that Lakshmi also mentioned, and creating these opportunities at the grassroots level, right, where you are able to show a young person what the future is. If I see that all the women in a particular company have a hard stop at mid-management, I'm not going to stay there, even if the company is talking a big game, right? So maybe there is that opportunity. And I love the idea of setting diversity as a target at the same level as perhaps like any other kind of performance metric, right? Because what you talked about, Lakshmi, the pipeline of nominations to any role, right? Or if there is a job, that opportunity that occurs, we don't only want to see 10 male names. We want to see the best people for that job. And sometimes it takes a little more effort to find, women who would be able to compete, purely because if it's a bunch of men making the recommendations, they're likely to make more male recommendations, which is why maybe we need more women in HR. Would we agree, Lakshmi? More women in the HR part of the business?
We need women across all parts of the organization because the hiring decisions, the promotion decisions are being taken by the people leads on the frontier. So I think it's across functions, departments, roles, etc., not just HR, because I think HR just plays an enabling role. And in my view, you've got to have the women leaders on the forefront, because to your point, if you're not going to have women in those roles, you're not going to have role models for others to look up and be inspired by. And can believe that they can actually continue to grow their careers. Today, my India chair is Rekha. Rekha Menon, a woman. My CEO is a woman. My CHRO is a woman. My CFO is a woman. My CMO is a woman. I mean, we need to have more women in multiple leadership roles to be able to inspire other people, other women, that there is no glass ceiling. You can continue to progress in this organization. So yes and no.
I'd love for you to tell us a little bit, all three of you actually, to tell us a little bit about how having women in these leadership roles has impacted culture, if you could sort of compare what it was before to now. And that'll give Radhika, I'm sure, a lot more hope.
Let me start there, because I also think I'm worried I'm giving VIP too much of a bad rep. So let me clarify one thing. Our women percentage in head office, which includes roles like legal, marketing, design, HR, finance, is much better. And the reason the numbers are so skewed is because we have a heavily male-dominated sales team and manufacturing team, and large numbers of people are there. But I will say, the one thing I was able to do being a woman leader is I think I was able to quickly improve the feeling of safety and security in our working culture, because we took I took sexual harassment very seriously, prevention of sexual harassment very seriously, the training around it. It's a mandatory training, but you do it in letter or you do it in spirit. So I think that was something I was able to quickly solve, or not solve, but improve.
That's wonderful.
I think empathy matters, especially in today's world. And empathy is not just being sympathetic, but taking action based on what you listen and hear from people. And in kind of broad brushing, women connect better with, customers, connect better perhaps with other people, and the ability to build trust and nurture relationships and provide recommendations from. So I think in general, I think that has shifted over the last several years, and post-pandemic even more so, where I think increasingly there's a recognition that as leaders, men, women equally, the need to be more empathetic and focused on people, their well-being, and having those one-on-one conversations and engaging with people in career conversations, whether men or women, and being hyper-personalized. All of that, I think, has been a big shift over the last several years that I've seen. I don't know if I will directly attribute it to just the women leadership that we have, but I think it's about collectively increasing the sensitivity of managing a more equal and diverse workforce. That has definitely helped, because we do a ton of investment in having conversations with all leaders, men and women, about sensitization on biases or unconscious biases that could be at play, whether they are working with LGBTQI persons from that community, or persons with disability, or persons or women more than men. And really having those sensitization conversations, I think, has helped increase the level of empathy and increase the level of appreciation that there are different needs, and it's very, very person specific. No two women have the same needs. No two men have the same needs. No two persons with disability who have learning disability have the same needs. And that's really been our big shift. Again, I don't want to take the credit of that being largely because of women, but I think it's because of the whole conversation about men and women and all other diverse groups kind of joining together and getting more sensitized about the needs of our diverse people. That has helped.
That's lovely. Thank you for sharing that. Kirti, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Women tend to underestimate themselves and men tend to overestimate themselves. That's always been the case, right? You go to school and the boy will say, I'm going to pass. And the girl will say, my exam was so bad. And he's going to get 50 and she's going to get 70. So I think when we see leaders and so many women leaders at the top, it suddenly becomes a reality. People start believing that this is possible, because if she can do it with the same problems, that I am facing, then I can do it too. I have seen that many people are more willing to join Relove because they know that they'll be treated very well over here because there's a woman on the top.
Thank you for sharing that. I just have one last question. We're almost out of time. So one last question that, from your experience, what do you think is the number one habit that Indian women can inculcate that will lead them to greater success? If we could start with you, Radhika.
Learn how to say no, especially outside of work.
Okay, could you elaborate on that a little?
Yeah, learn how to say no to, attending that distant relative's wedding, or some midweek dinner time engagement that you really don't want to do because you'd rather spend that 60 minutes or 90 minutes with your child because you've had a long week at work. So that's what I mean. Learn how to just put yourself first and say no to other people.
That's a very powerful lesson. Thank you for sharing that. Kirti, coming to you, what is the one habit?
Focus on performance winning over sexism, because I think that is a very good formula to be able to succeed and reserve your energy from all of that negativity that sexism will make you feel, and push it and power your performance with that.
I love that. That should be on a t-shirt. Maybe Okhai can produce that t-shirt. Lakshmi, coming to you.
For me, that would be self-care. As women, I believe we need to do a much better job of putting ourselves higher up on our own to-do list. We take care of our needs. It's a little ironic because in a lot of the families that I've known, women making most of the healthcare decisions for the families, but when it comes to their own health, it gets put behind their children, behind their spouses or partners, or even pets, perhaps, right? And if you look at, therefore, in light of the increased responsibility load on women, it has become even more important. I have known women who put off making a doctor's appointment for themselves because they're so busy taking care of everybody else, or simply just busy at work. And so therefore, this is really for all the women out there who are listening today. If you're not taking care of your own health, you cannot help others. You can only support and nurture from a place of abundance when your own cup is full. And we need to start with small things. Start with, creating space for yourself every day. Carve out your me time every day and take time to pursue your passions, your interests, and set boundaries to what Radhika mentioned. Set boundaries not just at work, but even at home, or just simply set time to, learn something new. But we've got to be more mindful and disciplined about self-care, because remember, self-care is necessary. It is not self-indulgent. That's what I would prioritize.
And I think hearing from the three of you, that you give yourselves permission to do these things, to step away from toxicity, to say no, to prioritize self-care is going to inspire many other women who often feel that guilt. There's a beautiful quote that one of the women, Amita Thapar, often says is women are great at time management but terrible at guilt management, because we just carry so much guilt about saying no. We carry so much guilt about prioritizing ourselves. I think this is going to really help a lot of women focus on their goals and achieve them. So thank you so very much. It's been my pleasure to be in conversation with you, and I hope you had a lovely time. And thank you for inspiring all of us today. Thank you to Accenture for making this panel happen, to the three of you for taking the time out. Have a wonderful day, and I hope that we are able to inspire many young minds who are watching us today, and perhaps many of them will join Accenture or Okhai, Relove, and VIP. They'll be right there with you in the boardroom meetings, Radhika. That is my hope. Thank you very much. Have a lovely day, everybody.